Hi, hello, my name is Sydney. Welcome to or welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about all of the books I read in January. So January was actually a really good reading month for me. I read a total of 7 books, and some of those books I did listen to via audiobook on Audible or Libby, just because I feel like that's a lot of books to read, and I read some pretty chunky books this month. I'm really trying to get through my TBR this year, my physical TBR, because I think I started with about 60 at the beginning of the year, and I feel like that is just a little bit outrageous. So I've really tried to stick to my TBR in January. I believe I read every single book on my January TBR, which I'm really proud of, and hopefully we can continue on that path the rest of the year. But let's just get into all 7 of the books I read in January. The first book I finished in January was Keeping 13 by Chloe Walsh, and I actually ended up giving this book a 5 stars. If you don't know, this is part of the Boys of Tommen series. This is the second book in this series, which is following Johnny and Shannon, and oh my gosh, guys, I was so skeptical about this series, and I just didn't think I would really like it because it had so much hype on TikTok and BookTube, and it just didn't seem like something that I would love. I don't really read too many sports romances, which is something I'm trying to get into this year. But if you guys don't know, this is a rugby sports romance, and definitely check the trigger warnings before jumping into this series, just because there are a lot of touchy and very sensitive topics that are tackled in this series. But oh my gosh, this book was so good. Obviously, the first one, Binding 13, was absolutely amazing. I also rated that one a 5 stars, but I can't really tell you guys too much about this one, obviously, since it's a second book in the series. The character development in this book was so amazing. I felt like our female main character, Shannon, really grew into herself and became more confident throughout the book, which is something that I could really appreciate because obviously the stuff that she goes through in this book is really, really serious, and just being able to see how she's coped with everything and how she really just like learns more about herself through this story and kind of like a little bit of the found family is so amazing. I absolutely loved it, and I could not recommend this series anymore. Please pick this up if you haven't already. The next book I read this month was actually for a book club I'm a part of on Fable, and that is Assistant to the Villain, and I gave this book a 3.25 stars, which I feel like is a little bit low for me. By all means, that's not like I hated this book or anything. I actually really enjoyed this book. I just feel like it was the wrong time to read it for me. I don't know why. I guess I just wasn't in the mood for this book, and I should have waited until later on in the month to read it. But it's pretty much like a comedic fantasy. There's a lot of like bickering between our female main character and our male main character. All of the dialogue between them is so funny, and it's like got a little bit of romance. It's nothing like too serious. There's, I believe the second to the book is Apprentice to the Villain, and I think that one has a little bit more romance, which obviously with this being, I think it's only a duology. Actually, honestly, I don't know, but I definitely am going to continue this series. I just think it maybe was not the right time for me, and I know a lot of people really liked this book, but I don't know. It like didn't give me too many feelings. It was just kind of like something that I was reading to kind of get through and check off, which again, that's probably my fault just because I wasn't super interested in reading it at the time. Next book I actually listened to on audiobook, and I really recommend listening to this series on audiobook just because the voice actors were so good, but that is Magnolia Parks A Long Way Home. This is the second book for Magnolia. It's the third book in the Magnolia Parks Daisy Hates series, but oh my gosh, guys, I gave this one a 5 stars. I absolutely love Magnolia and BJ. Yes, they are in such a toxic relationship, but oh my gosh, guys, this book was so good. This world, like, I feel like these characters are real. Like, when I was listening to this book and when I read the previous book, I just felt like these were real people. The best I can like describe Magnolia Parks is like Gossip Girl, but set in the UK. Obviously, since this is the second book for the Magnolia Parks part of things, I can't really tell you guys too much about it, but Oh my gosh. I don't even know. I'm just smiling thinking about it because it was so freaking good. And if you guys haven't started the Magnolia Park Stacey Hates series yet, I need you guys to start it. And I definitely, like I said, recommend reading this or listening to it on audiobook if you can, because again, the voice actors were just so good. I feel like I was like literally like watching a movie. And I just can't even say enough good things about this series. So you guys absolutely need to go pick it up if you haven't already. Next up, I read Iron Flame and I gave this a 4.25. And I'm not gonna lie, this definitely wasn't my favorite. I feel like the only reason I gave it a 4.25 is because I absolutely love Violet and Xaden. There's like, you could give me a novella, you could give me like their grocery list or literally anything, and I will read it as long as their names are mentioned. And I just love the romance. So I just couldn't give it anything lower than a 4. I just feel like that wouldn't be okay. But I don't know. I just feel like there was a lot of conflict in between Xaden and Violet that was either like never resolved or it just had like no point, I feel like, which was a little bit annoying. I know a lot of people say that they like really don't like this book, and I did really like it. I just didn't obviously love it as much as Fourth Wing. And I know for some people, like maybe they might not recommend like even continuing on the series after reading Fourth Wing just because the next couple of books have been a little bit of a letdown. But honestly, I think it's a fun time. I really enjoyed it. Is it a little bit of a long book? Yes, but I did listen to it on audiobook just because it is so long and I knew I would not be able to read this again because when I read Fourth Wing last year, it took me so long to finish. And I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to experience listening to it on audiobook. So obviously I did, but I had to pick up the hardcover or the physical copy, of course. But I don't know, would I recommend reading this book if you've already read Fourth Wing? I think yes, but that's kind of just like up to you. If you really enjoy Violet and Xaden, I'd obviously definitely recommend because their romance is so cute. But I don't know, it just definitely was not really that comparable to Fourth Wing. The 5th book I read was Wildfire by Hannah Grace, and this is the 2nd book in the Maple Hill series, and this one is between Russ and Aurora, and I absolutely loved this romance. I gave this a 3.75, and I was a little bit disappointed, I'm not gonna lie, just because I really did like Icebreaker a lot, and I never really read sports romances, and if you don't know, this is a hockey romance, but this book like had no hockey in it, which is completely fine. I obviously, like, if you don't know, this is set at a summer camp, and these two main characters, Russ and Aurora, are camp counselors, and they pretty much like have like a one night stand, and all of this is like on the back of the book, so no spoilers, but they have a one night stand and then they end up like seeing each other at this camp, and they end up realizing that they're working together for the whole summer and you're not allowed to mingle with the other camp counselors. So obviously that sounds really interesting and I was really excited to go into this book. It just didn't give me what I wanted it to. I just definitely liked the first one a little bit more. And if you can't like tell from the cover and obviously it being like a summer camp, I probably should have waited to read this in the summer, but I really wanted to continue this series. I just like missed this world, so I had to definitely jump into it, of course. But check the trigger warnings. There's like a couple of things that happen in this book that might be like a little triggering for some people. But overall, I did really enjoy this book, but I definitely think I liked Icebreaker more than this. But the characters in this, I'm not gonna lie, were so cute. I absolutely loved Aurora, and Russ was like, are you kidding? He was such a good book boyfriend. And I'm also not gonna lie, there was a couple of times where I felt like I was a little bit bored. It might have just been a me thing where I was like not completely focused in on the book, but I just felt like my mind wandering while I was trying to read this. But that could definitely, like I said, just be a me thing. Next up, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and this book I gave a 4 stars. It was so good. I absolutely loved the magic in this book. We were pretty much just following our main character, Addie LaRue, and she ends up making a deal with somebody where she gets to live forever, but there are some consequences to that, and she pretty much is not remembered by anybody. So she's just like living her life. She can literally walk into a room, do something crazy, walk out, nobody's ever gonna remember. They never remember her face, they never remember her name. She can't even like speak her name, which is absolutely crazy. She pretty much like loses her identity. But this book was so good. Every time I put it down, I always felt myself coming back to wanting to pick it up again. I low-key feel like I should give it like a higher rating, but there was just like something that was like a little bit off, and I don't know what, but it was just overall such a good book, and I just like fell in love. I think the only thing that like kind of threw me off was when we would go in like past and present POVs, which I obviously 100% get why the past POVs were in the story, because it really did make the story. But I found myself like waiting and like wanting to end the chapters with us in the past POV because I really wanted to be in the present POV. So like that was the only thing, but I just feel like I was so excited to keep reading this book that was like, I just wanted all the present POVs, and I don't know, I just really liked it, and I really loved our character. I also really liked V.E. Schwab's writing, so I think I'm gonna end up picking up more books by this author. Last but not least, we have the most crazy, most hyped up new release of the year, at least to me and probably to a lot of you, but we have Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, and oh my gosh, I ended up getting my hands on the special edition, not the Target special edition, but just the Barnes & Noble special edition. Oh my gosh, guys, I'm sure all of you have probably seen the TikToks of people like fighting over this book. Absolutely crazy. I just could not imagine like being that like excited. I mean, obviously I was excited for this book, but like fighting over it, that's a little bit much. I ended up rating this book a 3.75, and I'm not gonna lie, I did not really like this book. I was a little bit confused a lot of the time just because there were so many new characters being introduced, which I'm pretty sure this is gonna be like a 5 to 7 book series. So I feel like that makes sense for the way this was written for it being a third book in the series. I just feel like there was so much happening. Like there was still world building, which is completely fine. Obviously, with it being a fantasy, I'm kind of always expecting to learn new things, but I feel like the world building and the new characters we were introduced to just like came out of nowhere. Dukes and kings or whoever, like leaders that I was like, I didn't even know these places existed, and now all of a sudden they're just like here and they're a really relevant part of the story. I also didn't really appreciate the back and forth we got between Violet and Xaden. I just feel like there was so much bickering, and there was like, again, never a solution. There was never like an outcome. It was just like, let's fight and then let's not talk about it ever again. So there was never any like resolution to the conflict, which kind of a little bit annoyed me. And I feel like it was also weird when Xaden was like, you can't touch me and blah blah blah, and then he was like, okay, like let's just forget about everything. So it just like made no real sense to me. I also just feel like some of like the journeys or like missions they went on were like a little bit dragged out and kind of like not really doing much, like not really contributing much to the overall plot of the story. And like when we did get to like the point where we were trying to get to in the story and one of like the main like journeys or missions, whatever, it just like done. Like it happened so fast within like a page or two, maybe. And then it was like, that was it. And I was like, we had so much build up to this, and like nothing happened. So I was like really confused and really annoyed why it wasn't like a bigger thing or why something more didn't happen. I don't know. Overall, I just feel like this was very information heavy, and we were introduced to so many new characters. I felt like a little bit lost at the beginning. Like towards the middle and end, I ended up like picking up on things more, but in the beginning I was honestly totally confused. But again, I kind of understand why Rebecca Yarros did this, especially since it's the third book in a series, like having the world building and the new character introductions. I'm assuming these characters and these, you know, new parts of the world that we're learning about will be more relevant in the next books. But I don't know, overall 3.75 definitely wasn't my favorite, but I didn't hate it. those were all of these 7 books I read in the month of January. If you read any of them, definitely let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments, and if you agreed with any of my ratings or any of the points I made about these books. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and happy reading.